Okay.
Hello.
So,
This meeting is being
namaste and greetings to one and all present here. I, Randhir Kumar Gautam, on behalf of Vishwaneedam Center for Asian Blossoming, welcome you to attend today's Swadhyay Sahachakra dialogue on the very topic Creative Collaborative Ecologies of Creative Laboratories of Science, Research, and Life in South Asia and the world. I am extremely overwhelmed to get this opportunity to welcome you all on this Swadhyay Sahachakra Sunday dialogue. I welcome our speakers of today's session, Professor Rameshwara Adhikari ji from Tribhuvan University, Nepal. I welcome Professor Shandar Ahmad from Jawaharlal Nehru University, India. I welcome moderator of today's session, Professor Ananta, Professor Gyan Gului, Dr. Salva, Anjani Bahan, Minati Pradhan, Professor Sudhir. I can see so many friends co-present here. I welcome you all. Today we have two speakers. Both are trained in natural science, one in chemistry, Professor Ahmad Bhai in physics, but they have a very deep understanding of philosophy and love of philosophical insight. Let me give a kind of brief introduction of Professor Adhikari. Professor Adhikari trained in very important and famous university in Nepal, Tribhuvan University. He did his PhD from Martin Luther University, Germany. He keeps a very strong research profile with more than 2,300 citations in Google Scholars with H-index 27. But he's a great motivator also, particularly for young students. He is nurturing an idea called Laboratory of Life, which Professor Ananta told me just last week. So we are very curious to know about that idea. Professor Ahmad Bhai is a very important and very well-known in our circle, particularly those who study sociology of science. I have just gone through his website called SCI-WHY Lab.
SciY Lab, yeah. SciY.
Shared the link in the chat box also and the Facebook platform. So Shandar Ahmad is a professor at Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, and he is also nominated visiting scientist at National Institute of Biomedical Innovation, Health and Nutrition, Japan. He has also been in Jamia Millia Islamia. He is a very highly cited research scientist. Very deep interest in data-driven biology, bioinformatics, machine learning application, and he is also a poet. He writes in Urdu and English, but science is something which attracts him always, and particularly he has deep a kind of authority in the field of data-driven biology and bioinformatics. So on behalf of Vishwaneedam Center for Asian Blossoming, we are very happy that both of them accepted our invitation and agreed to talk on the very topic. Let me also give a kind of brief introduction of our Swadhyay Sahachakra. That is circle of co-learning and mutual studies. It is an initiative of studying and learning together, culture, societies, and the world. Friends associated with this are eager to walk and mediate with new horizons of thinking and new movements of social and cultural change at work in our contemporary world. We study seekers such as Sri Aurobindo, Mahatma Gandhi, Chitrajan Das, a creative seeker and thinker from Orissa, and many others from around the world. We also present our own writing and reflect upon our creativity together. We invite people from different fields of life to share their knowledge, wisdom, insights for creating a world of beauty, dignity, and dialogue. We have collaborations with many institutions in India and abroad, and we look forward for your kind interest, participation, and engagement. So, with this brief introduction, may I like to invite Professor Ananta to kindly give a brief introduction and introduce the topic.
Thank you
Yes,
so much.
Ananta bhai, over to you.
Yes, thank you so much, dear Randhir. And thank you, Rameshwar bhai. Thank you, Shandar bhai. Salam alaikum, Om Namah Shivaya, and Om Divine Mother. And we are joined by Professor Mira Chakravarti and all friends co-present. And it is a joy to be together. And just after a week, last week on Sunday, I was in Pokhara with a student of Professor Rameshwara Adhikari, a very deep scientist as well as a poet, Dr. Harisaran Adhikari. And this is the kind of the continuum of life. As E.O. Wilson, the great biologist, he really invites us to realize, how science is a journey with life, his work Consilience. We are part of nature. We are part of that unbroken continuum of life and spirit. So it was a great gift and blessing for me to be part of a very exciting dialogue that Rameshwar Bhai, Professor Rameshwar Adhikari had nurtured in Kathmandu from April 16th for a few days, which was also supported by the Humboldt Foundation on transforming science and culture. And there I was very touched by the presentation of Professor Adhikari on creating laboratories as spaces of collaboration. How do we create networks so that our physical difficulties, our infrastructural difficulties do not chain us? We create an ecology of support for our quest of science and quest for truth. And that has very practical consequences. Because in many places, not only in Nepal, but also in India, that look at, for example, school education and college education. Now, the research activity in school and college education, and here Professor Ahmad can also help us to understand, because it is a unique thing that Shandar Bhai also had taught in a school. So he has the experience of teaching in a school, and he can tell us about what is the condition of laboratories and science teaching in schools. But there is a disjunction between research in the university and research in the school level and the college level. And partly because of laboratory problem, infrastructural problem. And therefore, Professor Adhikari's idea about creating ecology of support for laboratories. Suppose you have a laboratory in Kathmandu, and to create a link of support where even in the remote part people can be linked. In India, we have very interesting laboratories, and how our brothers and sisters of Nepal can really have access to that. So it is in that spirit we need to think about creating collaborative ecologies of creative laboratories. How do we create an ecology of that? And it calls for collaboration along multiple fronts. SARC, for example, which is almost moribund today. SARC was a dream and an aspiration for better collaboration among people and students and seekers of our South Asian region. Now, the South Asian University in New Delhi could have played that catalytic role, but it is still not, it has not helped us too much. It has also only moved a few steps. So how do we create these laboratories of collaboration? And with and beyond governmental cooperation, as interested scholars, as scientists, how do we, create, new realities and possibilities for that? This is one thing. Secondly, our very idea of the laboratory itself. Now there is a laboratory in laboratory, but there is also laboratory of life. Yes, I see here Dr. Harisarana Adhikari joining us, Ram Rocha. Only this time a week ago, I was sitting behind his scooter and came rushing to his home. And thank you for your deep love and generosity. So there is the question of laboratory, but laboratory is not just confined to the so-called laboratory. As Gandhi says, that our whole life is a laboratory, my experiments with truth. Therefore, we need to have a broader idea of laboratory in science laboratories, but also laboratory of life and society. Here I remember that how Sri Aurobindo and the spiritual co-sadhika of Sri Aurobindo, and Nature and Divine once commented that the ashram is a laboratory. It's a laboratory of the world. It's a laboratory of our human life, our limits and possibilities. Similarly, Auroville, which began in 1968, it is a laboratory of humanity. Many people from many nationalities come. So we need to have for the specific idea of laboratory and a broader idea of laboratory. And in this, the work of sociologists of science like Bruno Latour, we had a conversation on him on his passing away 2 weeks ago. Bruno Latour, in his laboratory life, he begins his preface by saying that it is unfortunate that the criticism of science is only from scientists, if very rarely, but non-scientists do not have access to really make a critique of science. So therefore, this whole laboratory of life is also a plea for a greater collaboration between scientists who are trained, but also the so-called non-science. And one way of doing that would be a greater collaboration between science and arts, for example. In fact, our Professor Adhikari is deeply open to poetry and creativity. Dr. Harisarana Adhikari himself is an inspiring poet. That asks us the question, have you ever heard a scientist singing in a laboratory? For example, why can't we sing in the laboratory? Why can't we sing a song about our experience of being in the laboratory, our results? Why can't also be expressed in a poetic way? And how the laboratory space is also an aesthetic space, because somehow this link between science, art, and aesthetics has not happened much because of the construction of science in modernity. But today, as science is becoming a part of our life world in many cultures and societies, and we can also revisit European modernity, as Professor J.P.S. Uboy will tell us. Not only we have the way of doing science from Newton, but Newton himself was a deeply praying person, and his famous thing that I'm traveling on the source and whatever I know is only a little grain of sand. So that kind of humility. So, and Goethe himself was a scientist as well as a poet and a great artistic person. The idea of science as symbol. So how do we cultivate a new laboratory of science and life, which becomes a space of integration? And finally, the whole idea of experiment. We mainly experiment with objects. Therefore, scientific experiment Though in spaces like quantum physics and new biology, the subject-object dualism is always a problem which is being acknowledged, and scientists are finding ways of overcoming the dualism between subject and object. Therefore, a laboratory of life as well as a laboratory of science also has to embrace the question of the limits of dualism of subject and object, and how we experiment not only with external objects of nature, but also we experiment with ourselves. That brings the question of sensitivity to what is called as antahkarana, our inner instruments. And therefore, we and how being in the laboratory also is a way of being attentive to our antakarana, our inner instruments, and an appropriate cultivation of inner instruments going beyond subject-object dualism help us in creating a laboratory which helps us in the specific challenges of science, a laboratory which becomes a laboratory of life. In the meantime, both laboratory of life and science becomes a space and time for collaboration. Collaboration between scientists, poets, and artists, but also collaboration among different parts of a country, as well as different countries in a region, as well as different countries in the world. So with this, with joy, I invite Professor Adhikari, please. Professor Adhikari.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. You made a so nice philosophical introduction that it makes me a little difficult to proceed with my presentation. Thank you so much for the opportunity to come to this very interesting forum. And thank you so much also for your contribution in the Humboldt conference that we organized a week ago in Kathmandu. Thank you very much for your contribution and the discussions. So may I show some slides?
Yes.
May I share some slides?
You can see your slide.
Ananta bhai?
Yes, please. You can use
Yes,
the
yes.
Yeah, thank you. Just a minute. I'm sorry, I just want to skip present. I just want to know where it is. Yeah, this is here. So can you see my slides?
Yes.
So
Yes,
it should
sir,
be coming.
it is seen.
Yeah, thank you. So Ananta bhai and all the dignitaries who are present here, all the friends, very good evening. Namaste, salam alaikum. Hello. So thank you for the invitation. I will take some 20 minutes time to make a presentation on the topic that you can see here. As Professor Ananta already introduced, I am going to talk about Young Scientist International Laboratory for building research ecosystem and prosperity. So this is a kind of idea project. Yeah, this is just a concept for discussion. And as Professor Ananta was saying, we were discussing this topic in the conference, Kathmandu Humboldt College, which was targeted to discuss about interdisciplinary collaboration for strengthening science and culture. Yeah, Professor Giri already mentioned about the relationship between science and culture. Just to add a few lines, I may be wrong, but I think science is a kind of culture. Science is not only science. This starts from culture, it progresses with culture, and it develops with culture. So science is a part of culture. Science is itself a culture. It develops with the culture. And about the culture, I think culture, tradition, traditional knowledge, technology, or whatever we say about the development, society, social science, I think all these are sciences. All these are components of sciences. All these make the science a complete entity. I think so. To proceed, okay, I forgot to remove this picture. So we are talking about science, research, and the life. So creative, collaborative ecologies of creative laboratories of science, research, and life in South Asia and the world. This is the topic today we are going to discuss. And I already mentioned that I'm going to talk about Young Scientists International Laboratory. Of course, young people are very important in this aspect. As many philosophers have also mentioned, we count on youths, the present today, and also the future tomorrow, that count on the youths. So in my presentation, I will quickly first talk about the research work I'm working with, very few sentences. So these are the topics I'm working with. I'm very happy that also many of my collaborators are here today listening. I work mainly with biodegradable polymer composites. Traditional knowledge and technologies are also my interest. I'm also working these days or trying to learn about natural products and hops, nanomaterials and technologies, and different kind of polymers, including conducting polymers. These are the material science, physical science I'm working with. So about the topic, so please permit me to throw some thoughts and some very simple definitions related to the topic I'm talking about. First of all, about our ultimate goal. Our ultimate goal in life, we can define in different way, but one is to become prosper, to become developed, to become more sociable, more civilized, prosperity, which embodies happiness, peace, and joy in life. Not only physical, but also mental, spiritual, intellectual. These are the things that we want to achieve in the life. Prosperity. If we summarize all these things, it becomes prosperity. And the prosperity, we may define like prosperity needs employment, something to be busy, something to work with, so something to be engaged with. For the physical prosperity, we need, therefore, employment and enterprises. And for creating prosperity through enterprises and employment, we have the tools. And these tools are called science, technology, and the innovations in different areas of science, technology, and society, in management of both of them. And for that, we need dialogue, exchange of the dialogue and ideas, concepts, knowledges, and collaborations are needed to avoid disparity. Otherwise, we have seen that has happened, that the prosperity, employment, and the tools are concentrated in one part of the world, and not in the other parts. So we need dialogue, exchange of ideas and collaboration so that there is no disparity. There is uniform distribution of the prosperity. So for that, we need to strive to know our strength in local, regional, and international level. I think this is the most important thing that we all, irrespective of the geographical location or the place where we are working, or whatever work we are doing, whatever business we have, we should identify that we are strong. We are not weak. We should not think that we are weak. And doing so, we can build collaboration. If we think that we are weak, then weaker persons cannot make any collaborations. Weaker person cannot make any efforts. So we should first think that we are not weak. We should know that we are not weak. Then we should start building collaborations, network of collaborations, and we should exchange the ideas of collaborations and the collaborative functions for bringing about the change in the society. So I start with René Descartes, who declares, I think, therefore, I am. To support this, please permit me to show you some slides from our past. Just 2 slides. These are 2 pictures taken from Kathmandu Valley. On the left, you have a quite famous Nathapula temple built in 17th century. It survived 3 major earthquakes. On the right, there is one Moni Hiti, so-called Hiti, the water tap, which was built in 570 AD under the ground. And there is a underground water drainage system made by the engineers of that time. We can imagine that the people who made these infrastructures, who had these ideas, who had these thoughts, they were not educated as we are today. But they were, of course, much more smarter. Let us go to much earlier history. There are many, many things, many examples that we can find in many of our civilizations all over the world. I just take these examples from our region, but we can find this in Africa, in America, in Europe, everywhere. About Ghazal, so we can find many things discussed in Mahabharata. About 3,000 years ago, ghazals had been used, and it has been proved by several studies that these are the antibacterial nanoparticles. Our ancestors did not define it as nanoparticles, but they knew how to do it. So these thoughts they had. The recent example from the Sacred Project that was taught in China in 1960s. Many of us know about this. This lady was the leader of a project against malaria, or for finding the drug for malaria, which started in 1960, and she got Nobel Prize in 2015. And she was the person from mainland China who got the Nobel Prize in scientific category in which she was not educated. And she also did not have PhD. And she was never abroad. So I bring I don't want to mean that in the past, the things were so developed. in the past everything was better. I don't want to say that, but I'm just trying to tell that the thoughts were there. At that time, there was no internet, even no good paper and pen were available. Traveling was adventure, but people did it. There were tools, but made of stones and woods. And life was in general not easy. People lived not so long in the past. But today, we are much civilized, educated. We have degrees. We are doctors, professors. We know all the things, have vast knowledge, but we have made common sense the most uncommon thing of our era. And perhaps, along with many other parameters, this has created unjust distribution of resources and opportunities. With this, the consequences, we have enlarged the dimension of our greed. There is much bigger global fear in the history, possibly the innocent organelles of the universe, both seemingly living and non-living. Seemingly, I mean, have to pay for the stupidity of the intelligent creatures. Already mentioned disparity of resources and development has put peace and harmony of the society at risk. So we are in difficult situation. So there is an urgent need of actions by young scientists, including those who are today in the schools, particularly by young scientists, because the world belongs to them. This is theirs, and they can deal with the problems. They also have to deal with the problem because tomorrow is theirs. Tomorrow they will be there. So in this context, the actions are needed so that we can put more emphasis on education and research with young scientists' involvement, creating international laboratories. I am talking about both physical laboratories and virtual laboratories. Also of the laboratories in the mind. Laboratories should not always be present physically on the earth. The laboratories first evolve on the mind. They are created, they are engineered, first of all, in the mind of the people. After that, they could physically exist. And for the research ecosystem, we need collaboration. So that there is an ecosystem of research environment, research opportunities for developing the things further. We need collaboration. How can we do that? How can we make Young Scientists International Laboratory? What is this? So let me put a few words on Young Scientists International Laboratory. As in the beginning, Ananda told, so there is a chance, there is an opportunity, which is, I think, particularly has been demonstrated through the pandemic through the COVID-19 pandemic that we had to much suffer with during the last years. It has been demonstrated. We have seen that there is possibility of creating virtual laboratories too. So let me come to the Young Scientist Laboratories. Why we need it? Already mentioned disparity in resources in different countries exist. But also we have different potentials. So I don't want to discuss about why disparity, how disparity developed and so on. But this is in any case, a kind of stupidity of human beings, of ours, that we have not been able to wash away the disparity in resources and the development in the countries. So we have to see at the potentials. We also have potentials, different kind of potentials in different parts of the world. That could be our opportunity to create the lab. Some laboratories should not be in all places, same laboratories. Today, we have the situation that we have a very good institute in Kathmandu. We must have all the facilities in Kathmandu, in my laboratory, under my control. I should be the head. I should be able to control everything. This is how we think. Same as in India or in Africa or in America or in Europe. This is a kind of egocentric ideas we are developing more and more. Everything should be in my control, should be in my surrounding, that should be in my access. This is what we have. But we can think that the same laboratories should not be everywhere. If I have a good laboratory here in Kathmandu, why would it not be possible for the friends in Nigeria or friends in USA or friends in America to utilize it? For example, we have one in Thangoche, nearby Mount Everest. There is a wonderful laboratory. For decades, it is not being utilized for different reasons. Why should not we, Nepalese, be ready to welcome all the people from all over the world, to welcome them? Let us do the high altitude research in our laboratory. Let us put our all available physical resources that are needed together and work for the science, for the future. Okay, if we have a laboratory, they can be shared among the friends and among the friends of the friends. So that saves resources and contributes to sustainability. So how can we do that? How we can do that? First of all, like-minded research group can discuss. It is not something that we can discuss today, and we have the laboratory tomorrow. But as said, bade jayate tattvaboda, we can discuss, we can make the rules, we can make the sustainability plan, and we can start. That can be started with like-minded research groups. The research group heads can take the initiatives and make a plan for cross-disciplinary lab. Also involving the social sciences, not only the natural sciences or engineering. Because there are some areas coming up, data science, artificial intelligence, machine learning, these kind of things are emerging that have crossed the border of engineering or natural sciences or of the social sciences. They are all cross-disciplinary. And we can design and develop research projects involving young researchers, including postdocs, as coordinators. We can meet virtually, regularly, report the progresses, share the progress and ideas, and organize also joint physical conferences regularly. So I'm not going to elaborate about the research project. That can be of different kinds. It can be of social, natural sciences. It can be engineering. It can be even spiritual sciences, why not? Or we can develop the dialogues. But ultimately, it has been seen that the people need employment. They need businesses. Businesses, I don't mean the big businesses. They need in their place so that the places can be developed in their places, in their villages, in their towns. They need some small jobs. By doing so, in the university level, what we can do is we can design and implement joint graduate programs such as double degree programs, master's program, PhD programs, matching the courses of the study of different universities. We can initiate summer school, autumn school, winter school of graduate students on concerned areas. And that way, we can recruit the young scientists as scouts. So if you want to listen to me about what we in Nepal could offer for international collaboration, for making the laboratories, for utilizing your laboratories all over the world. We have an excellent natural lab, particularly for biodiversity, herbal medicine, including bacteria, natural product, for climate change studies, for climate protection studies, disaster management, and high altitude research. I already mentioned about Thangboche high altitude laboratory. I quote here by my dear friend, Dr. Buju. He has written an article about the land of superlatives, mentions about foods, weather, Himalaya, etc. So we have a difficulty in making physical laboratories. So we call for international collaborations in advanced physical laboratories. Just about the high altitude. This is the picture of Tila Valley in Jumla district. What you see here is a village in the town in the valley, and this is the rice field. And I want to tell you that Jumli Marsi, this is a variety of rice. This is grown at the altitude of 3,000 meters. This is perhaps the only place in the world. My friends from all over the world who are listening to me today, you please visit us and let us make a plan to go there. So we can, this is an example, but there are also many other examples. We can grow radish, onion, peach, cauliflower, potato, barley, buckwheat. In those places, around 4,000 meters above the sea level. So these are the opportunities we could offer for joint research. So I am almost coming to the end of my presentation. So who will take the initiative? Anybody? I can take the initiative. We have already taken the initiative, I want to say. We are talking about this topic. Now, this is not the idea that I am talking only to my students or my friends in Nepal, but I am talking now to all over the world, to all of the friends who are listening to me. So we have already started. So anybody who has a physical lab or the laboratory in the mind, or anybody who is willing to contribute. For example, a young professor in the university can take the lead, because there should be a leader. Yeah, there should be somebody who leads these kind of projects, somebody who leads the kind of dreams to the goal. The local government and universities should contribute. I want to say here should. Otherwise, why government? Why universities? Universities are not local. Universities are universities. They are universal. And the governments are to govern. Therefore, they should contribute. Local scholars should strive to convince the government and the other bodies. We also should do that. We cannot say that this is our freedom, or whether we do this or not. If we are a scholar, if we want to name us the scholar, we should do that. This falls upon the duty of the scholars. And coordination with organizations such as UNESCO, Alexander von Humboldt Foundation, the World Academy of Sciences, International Federation of Science, and the science diplomats, including us. We are not the paid diplomats, but we are the diplomats. We can put the dialogues. We can keep the dialogues to continue and develop new ideas. So just about the initiative, one initiative that we are working on in Nepal. Nepal Polymer Institute is a non-governmental organization affiliated to International Union of Pure and Applied Chemistry. We are going to launch a foundation to promote ambassador young scientists in collaboration with Science Teachers Association of Nepal. This Ambassador Young Scientist program is targeted to promote research in high schools in the areas of national interest. So we think promoting research in cross-disciplinary areas, in different areas of sciences, in high schools is very important. We are these days focusing more on research in the universities. Okay, universities, we should do that. But we think that the idea of research development should be implanted, should be brought to the minds of the young students when they are in the schools, when they are developing their ideas, when they are developing the dreams of ideas. So to promote this, to foster this, we are going to launch a program called Ambassador Young Scientist. So I think I could deliver you the kind of idea that we want to develop, and also the background of International Young Scientist Laboratory. The laboratory that could exist physically in any of the countries, but from those countries, young scientists, young leaders, young postdocs, young professors who want to contribute to the society, of course they want and they are doing, they should take the lead. And this should be the laboratory common to all the, it should not be common to everybody. It should be common to the young scientists from all over the world who are working on the projects of mutual interest. This is not easy, of course. This laboratory is physical laboratory. This can be several laboratories, dozens of laboratories in different parts of the world, which embodies which makes the common projects and works together. And this can also be a part of virtual laboratories. And for that, there are many challenges, of course. I will just put some challenges here. The first thing is the physical infrastructure. This is not easy, but to initiate, we can start from those physical infrastructures that we have in our laboratories. In our laboratories, I mean, in the laboratories of concerned persons in any of the laboratories in the world. Question will come, of course, if it is shared by the people from other countries and so on, they also have to put money and so on. Many questions will come. We will be able to answer them. We will also be able to adjust them. We will also be able to find out the sources together. So we need, more importantly, more important than the physical infrastructure, this is the emotional, intellectual foundation is very important. Very important is if we want it, if we want to engage it, if we are ready to suffer all the possible obstacles that might come, our preparedness, our patience. I want to remind you the patience of the lady Chinese scientist who started the project in 1960s and got Nobel Prize in 2015, and the passion. That requires more collaboration, more attention to education and research, and more networking of the scientists, not only in engineering or natural sciences, but also in social sciences. In all social sciences embodying, containing all those elements of the society. So for that, I conclude we need young scientists to engage more and more on the society. We should cultivate the young minds to work persistently, to work with passions, to work with dreams. We have to teach them, if we are teachers, teach them not to escape from the problems, not to escape from the local problems. So we need them to engage more. We need to cultivate more science leaders, diplomats and ambassadors and scouts, volunteers, not the job holders. We need the responsible leaders. And for that, we need to promote collaboration across the discipline, across the world, more exchanges in the culture, education and research. We should preserve our culture, every culture of the world, from all the continents, from all the societies, all the traditions. And for that, we need more exchanges of ideas and collaborations. So this is actually, I wanted to tell you in my presentation. So thank you so much for listening to me. Jai Ho. Thank you so much.
Jai Ho. And thank you, Rameshwara Bhai, Professor Adhikari, for your very deep presentation and many important thoughts and ways of moving ahead. I was also remembering your idea, your thought of the journey from Kathmandu to Kashi and Kathmandu to Kashi and to Aligarh Muslim University and to Harvard, Princeton and Cambridge. And that kind of spirit, when I had a word with Randhir to play the Kulgit of Banaras Hindu University, and written by a great scientist, but also such a beautiful poet, I think Santi Swarup Bhatnagar. And when we listen to him, tears come to our eyes. And one of the line is, O Raj, O Sarva Vidya Ka Raj Rani. So that idea of a university as the queen of all sciences, and that kind of crossroads and how we can cultivate that. Thank you with my heart for your deep sharing. And what you mentioned, suffering is so important, because one thing about science is that science is, and that is why the whole path of science today, it requires that kind of discipline. And we should not forget that the contemporary time, especially time of mobile and this kind of compression of time, but science always calls for a greater devotion with time, and that kind of a time to suffer and wait for a result, which may take 40 years, 50 years, and this is the sadhana. Therefore, link between science and suffering. And I'm remembering a line from Arnold Joseph Toynbee, the great historian, and who writes that there are two forces in life. One is power and another is suffering. And of course, power creates suffering, like the egotistic power or the link between power and science and the way it creates misery. But that kind of a suffering, what can be called as voluntary suffering, for the sake of our mutual prosperity, mutual quest for truth. And we also need to be ready for. And therefore, these laboratories, they help us to prepare ourselves for this sadhana of science and life. Thank you. So now with joy, I invite Shandar Bhai, Professor Shandar Ahmad, please, to help us in our journey.
Thank you very much, Ananta. And it was a pleasure to hear Dr. Adhikari speak about a variety of topics. I feel enlightened and I feel more learned after compared to what where I started before we started today's program. I was kind of preparing myself to speak extempore, and I did not have the proper idea of the size and the the grandeur of this program, which I am very impressed as I join it, and the number of people and the quality of discourse that has been going on. So while I took some advantage of the time that Professor Adhikari's talk gave me, and I put together a few things which would kind of I try to up my game to be at par with the audience here, and I hope I can make some little contribution to this discourse. So I'll share my slides if you allow me. Can the host allow me to share my screen?
Yes, you can share yours.
Yes, please. I have to usually do it in 2 steps because when I go to full screen, I can't share my screen. So I'll have to stop it again and then. Just okay, let me share the entire screen. I think that's easier. Okay, can you see my screen now? Full screen?
Yes.
Okay, so
Yes,
I
sir.
quickly titled my talk as Across the Aisle because I felt that there is a big aisle here, and on a corner is where I sit. And I share the field of interest. I come also from the field of sciences. And the discussion here is mainly being held on a philosophical and social basis. So I'll also talk about my own experiences in the field, how the people from different cultures, from disciplines, and can contribute, and have my own experiences based on that. I was also kind of encouraged with what Professor Giri told about my previous background of having an experience of teaching at different levels of education. I started my career with teaching in high school, and then now currently I teach at this university JNU, and was a former dean here. So also the cultural thing. So basic. I also the discussion also came about the name of my lab, where I named my lab as Sci-Fi Lab. So this is relevant for today's discussion because it raises kind of the name that we have given our laboratories, the scientific query. And the tagline that we give to our lab is Scientific Query for Humanity and Happiness. And this is also integrated into the logo that I show you here. And one thing which may not be visible is that the word Sci-Fi in Japanese means happiness. So drawing this kind of a wordplay and trying to draw scientific query, converting the scientific query into some kind of happiness, that is the motto and the objective that we have assigned to our lab. This is primarily a research lab, which works mainly in biological informatics, bioinformatics, and data science, machine learning. These are the kind of areas that we work in. And now, relevant to today's discussion, the question of scientific query is very much scientific, but the question of happiness is not really that scientific. What is happiness? This is a philosophical question. We say we derive happiness from scientific query, but what way we derive that happiness? Do we derive that happiness by getting more money? Or do we derive that happiness by feeling the pride that we have solved an unanswered question? Or do we just feel happiness by, producing something tangible for humanity? So there may be multiple ways of looking happiness, and happiness itself is a question of sociology, philosophy, and all kinds of social sciences. From me, for a scientist who is far from that, it might look all those subjects are similar, but they are also detailed specializations and they come here. So here I start another quote from Kipling, which can be placed in this context. Can we think of sciences, social sciences, philosophy, and those discourses to be like East and West as seen by Kipling? And he said, East is East and West is West, and never the twain shall meet. But they do meet, and have been meeting. And I said, the happiness. So the scientific query and happiness, as I just mentioned, and I try to talk about it from the perspective of the lab name that we have, is that query appears. When we say query, it appears that a query is scientific in nature. And when we talk about happiness, it seems to be more of a philosophical concept. But then there is a query in philosophy. The philosophical query is itself as important as the scientific query. And happiness itself is not just a matter of feeling happiness or describing or analyzing happiness. Happiness is also a scientific question. What happens in the brain? What happens to the biochemicals that run when we feel happy? What part of our brain actually controls the emotions? What part and what are the kind of can we artificially create happiness? Can we have a happiness pill? So this happiness therefore becomes not just a question of a philosophy of happiness, but also a scientific question, whether all the emotions that we talk about in a sublime way are ultimately, can they be reduced to some interplay between chemicals? So this is, from that perspective, the happiness is not the monopoly of the study by the social scientists or philosophers, and query is not the monopoly of the science. Query is made from in a descriptive manner, in a quantitative manner, and in an analytical manner. And all of them have their place in almost every discipline and every human act of learning. So, I have mentioned here ikigai, for example, the Japanese idea of happiness, so they're trying to analyze how happiness can be achieved. So this is just a quick mention here. I mentioned Japan here because I have lived in Japan for about 14 years. It is not exactly 14 years, but I round it off to, match with the Banbas. So, and about 13 to 14 years I have spent in Japan. Therefore, I have had a great experience of great opportunity of having experienced Japanese life in the laboratories and in the public life in terms of language, culture, and classrooms, laboratories, and the shops, the business style, etc. So, there is a broad consensus among the audience here, and that's why we are sitting here. And this is kind of reassuring ourselves. I'm not saying anything new, but we do know and we do acknowledge that knowledge transcends discipline for its own good. For its own good means good of the discipline and good of the knowledge. A discipline cannot grow and prosper without the contribution from other disciplines. Examples are, so my own personal examples are that I used to, since I mentioned I started my career in a school, and I was trained to be a teacher, a school teacher at that time. And that gave me another wonderful opportunity to understand the education psychology and some aspects of psychology. So I tried to study and have some experience with what is intelligence, what is learning from the point of view of a psychologist, from the point of view of an educationist. How do we learn? How do we assimilate? How do we accommodate the experiences around us? And how our cognitive development makes us different, at how a child at a younger age is different from a child at an elder age, just by the virtue of the kind of cognitive development. So those opportunities gave me some, some feel of these wonderful concepts. They have become now, these concepts have gone from the field of the intelligence studied as psychologists, learning theory is studied by psychologists, to computational sciences. And it would not be wrong to say that artificial intelligence, as we study today, would not be possible if people had not studied intelligence. Computational sciences, as they have evolved today, to be able to take the data science, to be able to develop machine learning. A machine cannot learn unless we understand what is learning. So many of the concepts that go into machine learning go into the artificial intelligence, the data science. Human brain uses them implicitly, and my own experience with having studied them long time ago, it helps me also to understand the intelligence of the machines and the better ways of making the machines learn. So this is an example I just added to your own understanding and consensus that the knowledge transcends discipline. And when knowledge transcends discipline, it contributes to discipline. It does not harm it. It brings value to the discipline. And there are many other fields, like in the computational sciences, if this is a narrower transfer, like if you have in the field of computational sciences and the whole branch, which is called evolutionary computing. So computer scientists came primarily from the fields of mathematics, physics, and statistics. And then many of the problems in the field of computational sciences could not be solved. And then people who came from biology, those researchers who studied biology and how the life itself has evolved from the elements to and simple organisms to bigger organisms and ultimately to the human beings. Those who studied this evolution, they were able to solve many of these optimization problems that existed in the field of computational sciences. If people were studying biology separately and computational sciences separately, this kind of knowledge enrichment and this kind of ability to solve of human beings to solve complex problems would not be possible. So this evolutionary computing and what we call biologically inspired computing and the psychologically inspired computing can be in some sense considered to be the foundation of the modern knowledge today. And one of the modern knowledges today that is everything now being studied in the form of machine intelligence and kind of automation. And these automations are only possible if we understand how the real systems work. And these real systems are studied by different people. So without the involvement of these people from multiple disciplines, problems can be solved and that cannot be solved. And a long time ago, the education is understood very well between the activity-based learning and the what is called the problem-solving based approach, problem-based approach. When we take a problem-based approach, we do not bother about from where we draw knowledge to solve it. So knowledge itself, I mean, the artificial intelligence itself today can be thought of the art of solving problems, but also the art of identification of problems. And the creativity, for example, is the AI and machine learning is interested in understanding how the creativity takes place. So this also is another example how the disciplines transcend. Knowledge is built by the transcending or going across the disciplines and trying to create machines that can write poetry, trying to create software that can draw paintings, and trying to draw the paintings from by taking your picture today, trying to infer what was your picture some time ago. This has not just the emotional value, but also the practical value of the forensics about the transferring the human tasks to machine. There are other issues whether you want to do it or not, but the knowledge cannot be stopped. Knowledge will continue to grow. So going further, now since we are talking about the integration of different knowledge, I share with you, take the liberty of sharing one of my own poems here, where I have put together how the different fields, this is the way we use poetry to explain, to teach data science. So this is a tribute to the data scientist. So it says, puts in context how physicist approaches knowledge, how a mathematician approaches knowledge, and how astrologer approaches knowledge. So physics is fundamentalist. Why I say it is fundamentalist? Because physics is always looking for the fundamental laws of nature, the basic laws of nature. So we can call it physics is fundamentalist. So physics is fundamentalist and fussy. It is and mathematics is dumb. Please, if there is any mathematician here, please forgive me. The idea here is the mathematics as such. Mathematicians may be very bright, but mathematics itself is dumb in the sense that mathematics does not want to go beyond the equations that can actually describe a system. And everything has to be converted into a kind of an abstraction. So that kind of abstraction is not always available. To look at the systems in individuality and to look at the system's variability, we need to have something beyond the traditional conventional mathematics, and that is where data sciences emerged for. That's what. And so, and the greater problem is not that of mathematics being dumb. The greater problem is that it is not easy, I would say, for myself. So the mathematics is dumb and not easy. Astrology, on the other hand, generalizes too fast. It looks at one example, it sees one cat, it says that the cat crossed my path and I had met a bad fortune. So it generalizes the rules. So it is too hasty. On the one hand, we have the fuss. On the other hand, we have the haste. So, but human brain actually is very balanced. Human brain uses none of them, because for deep inside its terrain, it knows to represent, test, and train. That is, these are the terminologies we use in machine learning. We represent knowledge, we test knowledge, we models, we train our models, and without bothering to explain. And there are many unexplained models in the field of data science today. We call it sometimes the black box neural networks as we use. So this is also about the brain. We often recognize our friends, but we cannot tell why I am saying this is my friend X and this is my friend Y. Can I identify the features based on which I can tell, okay, this person is Professor Adhikari and this person is Dr. Randhir? My brain quickly processes it. My brain does not go into the individual elements of their faces. My brain can quickly figure out the answer without having to explain why I am giving this answer. So this is what actually the data science, the intelligence is trying to do for the scientific world today. And that's why the data science rules the world. For even if a solution is transient, predictions are noisy and incoherent, they work the best for us because they are intelligent. That intelligence is like this. Intelligence does not give me the same answer every time I ask the intelligence to solve a problem. My intelligence will give me different answers and with different levels of accuracy. Sometimes my intelligence fails because it is trying to be too intelligent. And sometimes a person who is less intelligent can perform better because he's not bothering to think. So this is the kind of, I'm giving you this example as how we use these ideas, the medium of poetry, the medium of taking the inspirations from different disciplines to explain how our machine learning models, AI models can be explained and can be brought closer to the feeling of a student. That is how it happens. So other than my own field, I was trained as a physicist. I got my PhD in physics, then I moved to biophysics. I started doing bioinformatics, data science. And all this while, I was also writing poetry in my part-time. And I was also had the experience of teaching in a school, which gave me, as I said, the experience of, the skills required, the technology of education. And during the COVID times, we organized many workshops. This allowed us to provide this facility. We trained about 6,000 teachers across university and college teachers across the country who joined our workshops called VTOM, workshop for the empowerment of teaching through the online medium. So how to use Zoom, how to use the classroom, how to use different software. This was the need of the hour. So the question that we revisited at that time was how the technology impacts the process of learning. And technology does not impact just today through we are doing this wonderful conference through Zoom, but technology of this kinds have always been there. The disruptive nature of technologies, disruptive nature of knowledge that is being generated by the science and the technology is not the culprit. It has always been there. When the pen came for the first time, this was a big technology and it was a big change for people who were used to writing on a takhti. When the first time a book was printed, it was it was a big revolutionary change for people who were writing the notes and people writing the books by hand. So technologies have always, these are the examples of those things that we could come across. So technology has always impacted teaching learning process. And then these are some examples. So another thing where we need the inspiration from the philosophical, cultural, and across the disciplines is another example that I'm giving here, that in case of life sciences and biology, we often get multiple models or multiple data sets. So I want to know what gives me, what kind of cell is cancer cell and what stage of cancer cell it is. And when I look at the different types of data from one hospital to another hospital, from one laboratory to another laboratory, they do not actually agree. There is only an agreement to a certain degree. So we often come across this question, how to combine the evidence. This combination of evidence is not just a problem of science. This is a problem of, the consensus building in a society. when we have a heterogeneous society, individuals think differently. They have different beliefs, they have different ideas, they have different experiences. How can they come together to solve the problems of humanity? So there are parallels here, the parallel of having to combine the evidence from multiple laboratories in order to arrive at an answer which is useful for treating a disease, and here the human approach. So there we can enumerate and we can actually go into the scientific analysis and see what is the best way of combining evidence. So the combining evidence, for instance, if we just average it out, so can we average out and just get the best answer? Or should we use a veto-based approach where one person does not agree and then everything collapses? So what is the best approach? The consensus building, the majority-based consensus building versus the veto-based consensus building. What is best? These are the questions that have to be answered at the philosophical, social, and ideological level. And these are also the questions that have to be addressed in the scientific field in order to get the right to fulfill the objectives, such as solving a problem or such as creating a device that does what we want it to do. So now the data, we again another example where we have used, this is another right on the right hand side, this is a poem that I wrote, and on the left is what has been inspired, that has been taken from Natalie Babbitt, from Valerie Worth. One long ragged thread unravels the whole world. And then we say the data is big and abundant, but it can be reduced because we are in the world of big data problem. Everybody you see, if they just make a little effort on a given question of science, on a question of biology, they can generate huge amounts of data with very little cost. Or they can just extract the data. If you are studying the attitudes of people, you can just go to Twitter and you will have enormous amount of data to analyze. So this data that 1 million tweet think one way and another 1 million think a different way. So how do we process this large amounts of data and this big and abundant data? But the advantage and the real good news is that this data, it can be reduced and it can be deciphered because this data is redundant. So the problem of converting data into knowledge here reduces to the converting the non-redundant data into a redundant data, reducing the high dimensionality problem, as we say it in sciences, to a lower dimensionality problem, because those high dimensions are not really high dimensions. Many of these dimensions are just repeating one another. So how can we repeat them? How can we remove the repetitions? How can we remove the redundancies? This is what a question remains with us. So the cultural context of learning and science, now just my thoughts was that there are, when we say culture in a scientific laboratory, that I basically work in a computational field. So I do not have any test tubes in my laboratories. I do not have any instruments to measure anything. I just have computers. But computers nonetheless also are used to perform experiments, what we call the computational experiments. So the experiments on the computers that we perform, the way they are done from the point of view of a scientific culture versus a social culture. So what is the composition of my lab? If my lab has predominantly people from one particular culture or one particular gender, how the relationships between them can impact their performance, and how their cultural and gender and religious or ideological backgrounds can impact their relationship with me. So these are the questions that we address on a daily basis. And this does not just impact my relationship, but this also has a bearing on what people will produce in the end, and how well they will be able to, how rigorous they will be in their approach, what new ideas they can bring to the science. These are also influenced by the kind of the background they bring to the table. I was myself trained and I studied my high school in an Urdu medium school, vernacular school. So, and I had the opportunity to study and not really study, to work in some of the best institutes, and which were not really, which were very different from where I studied. I studied in what I school in Old Delhi called Mazharul Islam Secondary School, where my school curriculum involved not just the sciences. My curriculum also involved, how to pray, what are the verses, their translations, etc., and the poetry. And when I go and gave a talk in, say, Cambridge University, or give a talk in NIH, or when I talk, I'm meeting a very totally different audience, and very often a very diverse audience. But they're not interested in my cultural background. They are not, but they're interested in the science that I've generated. But the science that I produce is influenced with the experiences that I have, that my thought process moves in a direction which is knowingly or unknowingly influenced with what my experience has been. So, and the way I express, the choice of words that I make to write my research paper, all these are influenced with my previous experiences and what is considered civilized expression and what is considered an impolite expression. All those trainings that I got at my home, at my school of different cultures. So this understanding of the thought process of a student who comes from vernacular backgrounds compared to those who study from convents, what are their beliefs and how their minds have been conditioned during that time. It is not about just judging them, but also trying to take, in some sense, channelizing their energies that they bring here, the different kinds of energies that people bring to a research lab, how we channelize them, how to combine them, and how to integrate them in order to solve our problems and try to optimize what we call in science optimization of our outcomes. So as I said, I studied in vernacular school, I studied and worked in India, I worked in Malaysia, I worked in Japan, and these three countries like India, Malaysia, and Japan, they have very widely different social fabric and also the ideological, undertone in their work and the culture. When I go to a classroom in India, and when I go to a classroom in Japan, this can be a totally different experience. The way I can ask my students a question, and I can publicly question. I raise a question in my classroom and I ask, okay, this student should answer my question. This can be something welcome in our country, but this may be considered insulting in certain cultures. That if I pinpoint, okay, my question is this, can you answer this question? And when I pinpoint one particular student, that person may feel very humiliated. So the cultural background that he brings also has to tell me what should I do in my classroom, and what questions I should rightly and sensitively, with sensitivity, raise in my class. So what is the role of his faith? Now, a person may have been trained and he may have been indoctrinated that, the world was created in a particular way. And the world has evolved, science tells him. So now how to teach a theory of evolution to a student who deeply believes in intelligent creation? And what will be the place of theory of evolution in the mind of a person who continues to believe that evolution is not valid, but he continues to study that? And how the student actually deals with new knowledge, which may contradict with his belief on the one hand, but which may also try to disrupt his idea of universe on the other. And so when I introduce these concepts and when I discuss these concepts with them, my sensitivity and how can I draw, but even from his own beliefs, even from his own experiences, perhaps I can draw some of the experiences which can be useful for others. So how to positively channelize everyone's energy without being judgmental of their backgrounds, without being, critical of what they are, because after all, that is what they are. But there is also a certain idea about how to transfer that knowledge. That is, a teacher has his own vision of what he wants his students to ultimately achieve in terms of the scientific outcomes, in terms of the scientific thinking. So now, again, coming to the question of my lab question is scientific query. So query is about question. Is question same as questioning? So can we ask questions without questioning? So this is another point, that can we frame our questions in such a way that people do not feel defensive, and therefore how can we give them the best so that they can deal with the problems that they have been trained for. And I will conclude my discussion of today. And this is about, again, another poem that I wrote about the data science, which is about mimicking brain, shallow and deep. Shallow learning and deep learning are used in AI, that is why these terms, mimicking brain, shallow and deep. Machines learn when man is asleep, without complex equations or laws, making use of errors and flaws. Errors and flaws are used, error is minimized in a machine learning stage. That is why these terms. Regressive models are used in machine learning. That is why, again, these terms are here. Making use of errors and flaws, regressive, divisive, and classifying only in AI are so gratifying. They solve our problems. Okay, I stop here. Thank you for listening, and I'll welcome your comments. And
Thank you so much, Shukran.
hmm,
Bhai, Shukran.
thank you.
And we have the gift of your deep thoughts. At the same time, we have a little bit of knocking of the time. And I request your generosity, friends. So we are to conclude by 6:30. Maybe if it is okay, we can continue till 6:40 or 6:45, 15 minutes more if it is needed. So now I welcome question, comments, and thoughts, please. So you can raise your hands and as we are waiting for questions, we also have the gift of presence of Professor John Clamer. So John, may I request you to please initiate bring some thoughts to our conversation?
Meera Chakravarti madam has raised the hand.
Yes, please. Yes, Meera.
One to Professor Adhikari is that you have to have, it's a huge project. It's something that, as you agreed, you cannot handle just by yourself. You need collaboration. The first thing that I have, as very young students, seen, not even young students, even earlier perhaps, that after India's independence, our very bright scientist Homi Bhabha had a dialogue with the Prime Minister. What I want to say is that unless you have a dialogue with the scientists and the political people in your own place first, because you need land, you need cooperation, you need finance, and you need a good foundation. And each region has its own distinct research needs and demands. So one thing is generalization is not at all possible. That is one thing. So therefore, if that could be done, a selection can be made of star of people who really have passion for science. As I quoted, for us, it was Bhabha and a lot of people. We had a galaxy of scientists. So if that can be, if you start from there, you have to start from there, because that is the fundamentals which you will have to go to. So therefore, before appealing to others, that can be done. Then the mode of selections and logistics, all that will come later on. And also about autonomy. You know, the science, when you talk about a scientific project or something, the autonomy is extremely important. And that is why, and we had, I mean, Bhabha had total autonomy, and we are very proud of his work with Abdul Kalam, our president, who died, who wonderful scientist, scientific mentality, and a science person. So we have a lot of people. You can see the examples in India. That is one thing. To Shandar, I would like to ask you how the foundation will be designed, because you are culturally, you said you have these naturally the biases, because you were taught in vernacular schools, and then I think our generation all had vernacular schools. We all studied in government school, not very elitist doom school kind of thing. We are not there. So one is that the social imageries, how would the social imageries, because they are embedded in such complexities that it will be very difficult, challenging, not impossible, but very challenging. How would you resort to kind of liberalism that way? You know, so there, prejudices and ideas would not then trouble you as it is troubling now, because we have seen science is not, rather scientists are not neutral. Science, maybe I don't know, but scientists are not neutral. We have seen categories of women. Women have always worked under the scientists in a very subordinate way, you know. So therefore, I feel that how would you try to solve? Because Einstein himself was a patent clerk, and then he was very lucky to have come. So what happens is, how would you try to speak for it, or try to imagine that these could really be kind of the inequalities which we will try to not solve but confront them? How do you try to confront? Because there's possibility of semiotics too, and I do not want to go, because Ananta has said we have less time that we can discuss. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ananta. Randhir, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Meera. And my request to both Rameshwar Bhai and Shandar Bhai is to please make a little note of the questions, and we'll come after a little while. So thank you. And now we have another friend, Dr. Parajuli, raising his hand. Dr. Parajuli, please. Dr. Sejan Parajuli. Okay, he's taking some time. And other friends co-present. I see Dr. Priya from Christ University, Dr. Sela, then Dr. Harisaran Adhikari, Dr. Jennifer, to kindly share your thoughts briefly in a minute or so, please. Okay. Yes.
So I would like to put a brief response to the stimulating presentation by Professor Adhikari and Professor Shandar. So first of all, I would like to extend my gratitude. I am very thankful to you for your stimulating presentation that made me learn many things here. So thank you so much. So thank you, the host and organizers, Professor Giri, and all the conveners and organizers. So actually, I often thought that the poetry, literature, that comes from the soul, and the science comes from the brain. I often thought like that. But from today's presentation by Professor Adhikari and Professor Shandar, so I happen to shift my mind actually a little bit, because science is also, that is in the realm of God. That is, science is also a culture. And it was very stimulating to know that, to know about the laboratory of life. It was very overwhelmingly stimulating actually. And so we got to know about the exploration of the scientific research perspectives. And it was so nice to know that happiness is the subject of study in science. That was very wonderful. And so Professor Shandar, you mentioned about the education, psychology, problem solving, and human tasks. All these things are under the domain of science. So it was very nice. So I'd like to thank you for your wonderful talk. And I enjoyed the poetry, the poem by Professor Shandar, like the tribute to data science. It was so wonderful. And if the time permits, so I would like to keep a poem here. So Dr. Giri?
Yes, please.
Okay. It's a poem, the topic of my poem is of his call. I mean the call of the Lord. So the realm of God or situation embraces all and sundry with a name. A function required to run an algorithm of the time is a name. A function required to run an algorithm of the time is a name. The time is non-existent. The time is non-existent like the name in the realm two out of the way. In the realm two out of the way. In the twist of the situation, in the twist of the situation, complexity of the space here, complexity of the space here lies a whole of a whole, lies a HOLE, whole of a whole. Execution of every name follows the bytes of the memory. Execution of every name follows the bytes of the memory of the call of the Lord, of his call. Thank you.
Thank
So
you.
Very nice.
Thank you.
I have been very much thankful for your wonderful talk. And once again, I'm very thankful to the conveners and organizers of this wonderful program. Thank you.
Thank you, Harisharan Bhai. And just to add, his
Yeah.
call as well as her call, because God also is.
Yeah.
So lovely. So friends, any friend trying to speak, please do raise your hand. In the meantime, let me invite Randhir and Minati, please, to share their thoughts. Briefly, Randhir.
Thank you. I think presentation was so thought-provoking that it invites some deep engagement. One is that I am particularly a teaching professionals student. So they are having very positivist orientation towards science. Because when I teach them that you have to learn the method of choosing a answer where all the options are correct, means how you choose a right between, how do you choose more rightful thing, right? Suppose how do you have kind of orientation selection of 2, 3, 4 answers. I'm just trying to make kind of understanding that people are not ready to have a kind of develop perspective. They think that every problem has one solution, and that is to be actualized. And we don't have a kind of pedagogy of inculcating imaginations, right? We know how to give a kind of homework to them and how to make them kind of learn about the facts, but we don't know the and it is not a kind of a problem of pedagogy, it is a historical problem. When Thomas Kuhn came with the writings of structure of scientific revolution, he talked about like how theory of relativity brought some important transformation in social theory as well. And all the important sociologists, they were the natural scientists. But uh, that is lost in contemporary discourse, because when we ask even for that matter professional students to understand or to learn gender studies, or for that matter Gandhian studies, or for that matter environmental studies, they think like it is a subsidiary thing, right? Because they are not ready to connect environmental issues with their mainstream science. So means I'm just trying to kind of underline this problem of the classroom pedagogy, and our the kind of dichotomy that we practice between natural science and social science in everyday life. So I ask this question to Professor Ahmed sir and also Ram, Professor Adhikari. Thank you.
Thank you, Randhir. And I see Dr. Hassan. So Dr. Hassan, before Minati speak, would you like to share some thought? Dr. Hassan, please unmute yourself. Okay, as she's taking time, Minati, please.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Good evening, everyone. I would like to thank our two presenters for their very deep and insightful presentation. So, Anantbhai, I have just few points. Can I share? Just 2
Yes,
minutes.
please. Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to, some points on creative thinking over a variety of projects. As though we have all this machine learning and other things, but these things still, there are few points. You have to be being more human, behaving like a human. And the second point is, I'll just tell in a short this thing, looking for more creative side. I mean, more creative people should come into any project, any institutions, any learning things. And the thing is, questions and queries we cannot put thoughtlessly. It has to be like, frame the questions wisely. And survey, of course, it has got a very important role in research and things. But many times, when you go to the field, you find the survey is nothing. You find something else is the reality. So that is like setting aside the surveys. Then the research and other things, we have to make it stimulate physically. So, and we have to make use of our mental props. And creative research equipments can use all these things, creative thinking, over a variety of projects. That is what is my, opinion. And Anantbhai, you were telling, I will ask the same question actually. How can we link science and aesthetics? Because if we go by study, psychology and all, the right side of the brain works for the reasoning and logical things, and the left side for creative thinking. And everybody is not blessed to link these two things simultaneously or in the equal proportion. The people who are heavy in either side, how to, increase that balance. And for Professor Shandar Ahmad, I have not a question, a query actually. It is about, of course, machine learning has made our life very easier. There is no doubt. But then how do we deal with not only happiness, how do we deal with machine learning and other emotions? If you look at a flower, there are different perspectives for different people. A botanist looks at, the physical aspects of a flower, as a gardener looks at it in a different perspective, as a philosopher looks at it in a different perspective, and a poet looks at it in a different perspective. So how do, that machine learning and emotions, he can put a little bit light on that. And thank you for today. This much is my observation. Thank you.
Thank you, Minati. And now we also have some friends, Dr. Priya and Saurabh indicating to speak, and Dr. Hussain. So 1 minute each, please. Dr. Priya. Okay. Dr. Hussain. Okay. Okay. Dr. Saurabh. Okay. If not, so let me invite Professor Adhikari and Professor Ahmad to please share thought, and we would continue our conversation. So as briefly as possible, please, Professor Adhikari.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much again. Namaste again. I completely agree with Madam Chakrabarti. I also remember today that you were flying in the sky of Kathmandu on January 1 or 2, 2012. More than 10 years ago. The weather was bad and the flight could not land. And Anantaji was a little earlier, couple of days earlier in Kathmandu, he could land, but you could not land here.
Thank you.
Yeah. it happened at that time. Yeah, I still look forward that we one day meet soon in Nepal, in Kathmandu. You are very welcome. So about the third you said, I completely agree. Yeah, yeah, that is we have to first talk to the politicians. We have to convince them. We have to get them to the board, and we should proceed. Yeah. And also with the other argument, I completely agree with you. With what Randhir told, yeah, this is very interesting. Yeah, what I think I have no, I should tell that I have no much idea about how we can connect social science and natural science and vice versa. If they are two different parts or they are same, I don't know. What I think is, my thought is, I don't see, I think it is not necessary to make a demarcation, classification between social and natural sciences. All are sciences. So before the invention of electrons, protons, and neutrons, the society was there, conflicts were there, days and nights were there, happiness and sadness was there. Also the start and end of anything, any event was there. So there was always a kind of balance also there. So like electrons, protons, and neutrons. So therefore, science and social science, we make this kind of demarcation, but in the nature, in the life, I think they were all hand to hand, simultaneously there, and there is no demarcation. In my very primitive thinking, yeah, I think like that. So yeah, this is all I want to mention. And the madam after that she was talking about the brain and composition of the brain and what different parts of the brain does, and she was explaining the science of the brain. Yeah, it was very interesting to know. I'm very happy to be in this forum, and I'm also very happy to meet Professor Shandar Ahmad, to listen to your Shandar presentation.
Thank you very much. Same here.
I think my mission is already a little step success, because now I think I can collaborate with you. We can build a joint laboratory.
Thank you.
So thank you so much,
thank you,
Ananta Bhai, for connecting me with these nice people. Miraji, very welcome again. We should meet. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And now Shandar Bhai, please.
Okay, so thank you again, and thank you, Dr. Adhikari, for your acknowledgement of our interaction, which, I mean, you expressed my feelings as well. So there were three questions that came about towards me. One is about the prejudices and inequalities, how we kind of liberate the students or the people who come to study in a vernacular school, and prejudices based on the ideological basis or gender, for example. First of all, I would, from my experience, I can tell you that the gender or the ideological or philosophical or social prejudices in people who attend vernacular are not any different from those who attend the best school. I'm not saying they don't have prejudices or they are any better, but I think the prejudices is not the prerogative of people studying only one type of school. Or so people do come in vernaculars also with open minds. They want to learn, they want to enrich their experiences, they want to grow intellectually, they want to grow professionally, and they want to also meet people from other cultures. Yes, the disadvantage that the people who come here to study is that they do not have sufficient exposure to people from other backgrounds. So perhaps this is a question, these are the, I will not be able to give you any new solution. That many experts have been trying to answer these questions, and I will probably not be able to bring any totally fresh idea to this. But what comes to my mind is very important, is that the providing the exposure, providing the interaction to students studying in vernacular. So maybe different vernacular schools can come together, and maybe people studying in one language, let us say Urdu, or he's studying in Bengali, or maybe studying in Hindi, or maybe studying at a different culture background, how much time they spend with each other. They get to share platforms in sports, share platform in cultural activities. I think all of these things are done, but probably these are the areas which have to be strengthened, and where we have to. I see some opening there. Second thing is about, I would be very proud to say that in the laboratory sci-fi lab that I run here, I come from totally a vernacular background. My laboratory has a majority of my students are from the gender that doesn't belong to me. And they are very happy here, and as far as I understand. And I'm just mentioning this to say that the vernacular background is no barrier towards people being liberated, and a better educational environment or elitist environment of education is no guarantee that people will be liberated from their thought. So this is just a quick thought. I think there will be a lot more that you would like to tell me, and I would like to be enriched by that. But this is a quick thought that comes to my mind in this brief time. Same is true for Randhir. I would like to answer in a little more provocative way, if you forgive me, that the respect across the disciplines is not a matter of charity. I mean, nobody would respect another discipline just because he wants to become a better human being, or just because it is right. We live in the age of marketing. We need to, everybody today has to prove his worth in the field of market. And I am a total protagonist of the view that social sciences, philosophy are very important in the field of sciences as well. So there are two aspects of it. Well, first of all, the academic activity, the educational activity, is heavily guided today by the employability, by the people who, what would people do in the professional field after they finish their education. So and as far as employability is concerned, the employability of a thinker is unfortunately not necessarily higher than the employability of a person who needs to think nothing. He works just, in a mechanical way when he's employed. There is definitely a space on the top for thinkers who will bring fresh ideas. So what is this lesson here for us, for those who are interested in subjects across, and those who want to convince people who are not about the utility of things which they don't see them? These onus lies on us to show their utility. Onus lies on us to educate them how their work will become more important or more useful and more productive, in the very sense that they want to grow, and also the value of the things that they currently don't see as important. I mean, if I say that studying philosophy will enrich your life, will make you a better human being, or will make you more comfortable, or will make you happier, this is not sufficient. I have to demonstrate and give them a real convincing experience, though, so people get convinced by this. And for that, I have to be proactive about my discipline, and I can probably engage more and more scientists and give them the experience that they would like to cherish, and they will come back to us. So they will not do it just because I want to, I am not happy that they are not respecting. So there is definitely, I personally have, I am totally convinced about that this is important, but to convince a person, to convert somebody who is not converted, so that is the challenge before us. And that is that the onus does not lie on the scientist. Onus lies on us who are who basically are promoting this discipline, or who are basically those who have been trained in this discipline and who really understand the value of this discipline. So this is my quick, a little provocative answer. Perhaps we'll have more thoughts from you also. This is like one-way answer, so probably I cannot get an interactive discussion on this, maybe another time. Last point was raised was about how machine learning can deal with emotions. So one thing about machine learning and artificial intelligence is anything that you can describe can actually be modeled, can actually be incorporated. And if you can describe emotions, and if you're saying these are the diversity in the human emotions, that this person likes this particular color, this person likes another combinations of colors, and how can I incorporate the individual differences and the emotional element into how I perceive the world around us, these things, if once you can create a database of people, and once you can create a set of knowledge base on how people think, how diverse they are, and how one type of emotion within the same individual is related to another type of emotion. Once these things are incorporated, and there are people who are working in that, so these things are likely to become more and more possible. I was teaching an artificial intelligence class yesterday itself, and this question came up that more and more, I mean, anything that you can describe, anything that you can enumerate, you say that human beings think abruptly. They may suddenly change their mind. They may have some whims and fancies. Can machines have whims and fancies? Once you describe a whim and fancy, you can definitely program machine to do the whims and fancies. But there is a good news for the human beings to be proud of here. The amount of power, the amount of energy that a computer uses to solve the same problem is enormously, enormously higher. The amount of calculations that my brain can do with just 20 watt of energy, 20 watt of power, and therefore corresponding energies over a period of time, the same amount of work a machine can perform by thousands of times more energy. So our brains are highly energy efficient computers from that perspective. So and in the foreseeable future, that kind of saving of energy would not be possible. This is just a kind of I'm adding this information here, so we can feel proud that human beings will never be overtaken by the machines. But remember that anything that just as industrial revolution replaced many of the physical activities by machines. That was the development. Then before that, the development of the physical strength in the human beings was considered very important, and people used to spend lots of energies and times to build their strength and become better soldiers. Then the industrial revolution came, machines came, and so much of the physical activity of human beings were transferred to machine. Nobody could stop it. Same way, a lot of the mental activity that we do today has to be ultimately transferred to the machine. There's no stopping of it. I mean, just kind of just not being afraid of it will not solve the problem. We have to accept it. We have to also understand what is the place of human beings in such a scenario. And there is a lot of work that is going on in this direction. People are working on this, and people are also saying how what is harm if machine can do what we can do today. Let the machines do. The problem here, I'll just quickly mention that thought, is the problem here is not that machines can take away our employability. The problem here is the resources that are developed through the machine learning and through the artificial intelligence. Who owns those resources? So the debate should not be about AI versus human. The debate should really be about who owns these AI resources. You cannot stop the AI. You cannot stop the machine learning that will grow, that will continue to grow. But you can definitely check who actually owns these resources. These are my quick thoughts.
Thank you, Shandar bhai.
Ananta, one moment.
Okay. Yes.
Can I just?
Yes, please. Yes.
Shandar, I was suggesting the danger that is I mentioned about the finance. The finance or the funding agencies that give you the money for huge money for the research will guide the research orientation that we have seen everywhere in the universities and the institutions, and we are very afraid of that. That is what I was implying, not and the inequality, of course, the consequences they are there. So it's always the research which suffers because it is the funding agencies which try to dictate you. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah, that's definitely an issue. I think I will not disadvantage you by just answering this question. I think this is an important question we need to discuss. I'm on your side, and perhaps on another occasion we can think of what solutions to provide. Yeah, definitely the funders will influence, and I will just add to your point that funders are not always the public agencies. A lot of research is now being funded by private players, and therefore the funds flow with where the private sector and the private individuals would benefit them. Well, I don't rule out there will be philanthropists. It is like any other human development, whose interest is being fulfilled. And these are the questions I think very important and very dear to me. I would be benefited from listening to you in the future. And for the sake of time, I think this debate will just call it continuing instead of concluded.
Yes, lovely. Our Sahajatra. And so thank you. And one quick thought about Minati's query about science and creativity, and the left and right brain is that there are very important developments in studies of brain and neuroscience. And some of the pioneering thinkers there, for example, one from India, of Indian origin, V. Ramachandran, his work suggests the malleability of the left and right brain. And therefore, this malleability is there. It is also a fact of life. But with conscious cultivation, this malleability can be far more malleable. And for example, here with meditation and creativity, if a left brain person becomes much more creatively engaged, and that also kind of makes a contribution to further malleability of the division between the right and left brain. The work done in the Mind Brain Institute, which is also nurtured by the Dalai Lama, and it's a very interesting laboratory of life where the scientists and the meditation practitioners are collaborating. And they have come out with a very interesting phrase called neurogenesis. That means how there is also generation of new kind of neurons as a part of these kind of practices. So we continue our conversation, and now Minati, very briefly. And I also wish to say that today is the birthday of Minati, and she has been our co-traveler, and we are having a dialogue at 8:30 p.m. So all of you are invited, and if possible, Randhir, you can just type that Zoom link in the chat box, and you are all cordially invited. And the topic is literature, lost for life and transcendence. So Minati, you can please open your video and share your concluding thoughts.
Thank you, Ananta. So just I'll give vote of thanks now. It is time already 7 o'clock.
Happy birthday, Minati.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. Thank you. So this time I can expect a chocolate, right?
To give the cake first.
Yeah, that is there. Okay, thanks everyone. I, Minati Pradhan, on behalf of Sadhya Chakra and the Vishwaneedam Center for Asian Blossoming, like to thank everyone. Our chief speaker, Professor Rameshwara Adhikari, and Professor Shandar Ahmad for their very insightful and enlightening presentation. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. I would like to thank our moderator, Professor Kumar Giri, for every week, and our mentor for every week taking us to different different fields to learn a lot of things. Thank you, Ananta. Thank you so much. I also would like to thank Professor Meera Chakravarti, ma'am. It is a pleasure to have you in our webinar, ma'am. And thank you so much for your nice engagement, questions, and your opinion. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. I would also like to thank Professor John Claymore for being present in our webinar. I think he's not there right now, but anyway, I would like to thank Professor Harisharan Adhikari for his engagement, his questions, and for his beautiful poetry. Thank you, sir, so much for being with us. And at the last, not the least, I would like to thank our convener, Professor Randhir Kumar Gautam. Like every week, he plans, executes, and conducts the webinars so seriously. Thank you, Randhir. Thank you for everything. And I would also like to thank all our Zoom platform participants and the Facebook platform users for being with us in our journey. And pardon me if I've forgotten anybody's name. Thank you all. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.